Hello, everyone. Hope everybody can hear me. We're just setting up the webinar right now. So if this is your first time joining our webinar series, you'll notice that you're probably seeing on my screen right now the Facebook versus Google Ads presentation. And if you scroll down, there'll be an opportunity to answer questions, etc. And there's also going to be a chat window. Right now, I'm leaving it open just in case anybody has any technical difficulties. But once we start in about a couple of minutes, then we'll be disabling chat. And if you have any questions during the presentation at all, just add a question at the very bottom in the questions section, and then I will get to that right at the very end. So for now, we'll just kind of give another minute or so. I see if some people are still logging in right now. So we'll just give a couple of minutes, and then we'll get started. Hi, Brody. I just saw your message about hearing some noise. We're just giving everybody another minute or so just to join. I see people are still joining in the conference. We have about almost 30 people already joined in, so we're just waiting for a couple of more. We'll start in about 60 seconds. Okay, I think the bulk of everybody has joined, so we'll kind of get started. Just wanted to welcome everybody to our digital discovery series. We're going to be having these regular webinars quite frequently. Usually every week or every 2 weeks, we're going to have these webinar series for all of our partners. It's really to educate everybody about trending topics when it comes to digital. It's going to be a variety of information. And I see that somebody's just mentioning that they don't hear anything. Tamara, if you can just double check your mic, that'd be fantastic. Or sorry, your speakers. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be doing these kind of quite regularly throughout the year, and it's going to be a variety of people doing the presentations. It's always not just going to be myself. By the way, for those of you that are just joining in and don't know who I am, my name is Vimal. I'm the operations lead at Outreach Media, and Digital Discoveries are new upcoming baby for education and learning. And I wanted to welcome everybody to that. Today, our topic is Facebook versus Google Ads. Which one is right for my business? We'll have a variety of topics that'll be kind of introduced on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. If at any point in time you guys ever have any recommendations or requests on topics, feel free to email us at any point in time. And if it is a popular topic, we'll definitely take that into account and create a webinar based on that. For those of you that aren't able to hear or have any sort of issues, just double check your mic or your speakers. Sorry, not your mic, but your speakers, just to make sure that you can hear everything. Otherwise, a recorded version of this webinar will also be sent off to you by email, probably by this afternoon, by the system as well. So if anybody did miss it from your team or anything like that, you can forward them the email that comes over with the webinar information, including the video. Okay, so just for the sake of continuing, I'm going to leave the chat open. Normally on these webinars, I'd like to keep the chat closed. But if you have any sort of questions or anything like that, if this is your first time joining, if you scroll underneath the image where it says Facebook versus Google Ads, the presentation, there will be a section for questions. If at any point in time you have any sort of questions about anything that we're talking about, just enter it there, and I'll be more than happy to start answering them at the end of the presentation. So the length of this presentation is going to be about 35 to 45 minutes. My goal is to kind of finish around the 35-minute mark, and then the last 10 minutes for questions and answers. So let's get started. So just to kind of give you a little agenda about today's topic, we're going to be giving you an introduction to Google Ads, the offering, a little bit of a 101. We're also going to be doing a little 101 on Facebook ads, the pros and cons, typical use cases, and then, as I mentioned, the last section is going to be the questions and answers period for this presentation. So let's get started with the Google Ads portion. For those of you that haven't really ever got introduced to Google Ads, or this is kind of new to them, Google Ads was previously known as Google AdWords. It just recently changed within the last year. Up until about 2018, it was always called Google AdWords. Google AdWords was originally launched back in 2000. It's owned and operated by Google LLC, which was founded in 1998. The majority of their revenue comes from ad revenue, which is from the Google Ads platform. In 2018 alone, Google Ads was responsible for bringing Google $116 billion US in ad revenue. So it is quite a significant amount of dollars that are being spent on this channel, and it's probably one of the most popular channels when it comes to digital advertising. And it's kind of been coined, the term is that Google is the new Yellow Pages. So you might hear that in the industry. And what that basically means is that back in the days before search engines were very popular, print was the way to go. You would open up a 411, you would open up a Yellow Pages, and you would find the businesses that you're looking for. And if they weren't listed, too bad, so sad. But ever since the search engines came out, Google has become that new Yellow Pages. Anytime anybody expects to find any sort of information or looking for a product or service just to do research or find a company to service them, Google is kind of the top of the mind when it comes to the average consumer in North America. So that's why Google is now termed the new Yellow Pages. The search engine's results page, just to kind of give you a little overview of how your ads are displayed if you ever do any sort of advertising with Google Ads. This is a little screenshot of the Google Ads, the Google search engine results page. And the page is split up into different sections. You have a paid section as well as an organic section. So all the ads that advertisers will place are basically going to be showing up at the top and at the bottom of each search results page. So you'll notice on my screen, it has that Google AdWords, and it's got that little symbol there which says ad. That's what basically tells you that it's an ad or a sponsored ad on the page. Underneath that is the organic section. This is the default natural search behavior of the search engine. If you search for any product or services, then what search engines are supposed to naturally do is present you with the most relevant results, and that's what the organic section is. You cannot pay to manipulate the organic section. This is based on relevancy, and that's a whole different service called search engine optimization. There's a whole industry behind that, so that's the organic section. There is one other section that's not on my screenshot, which is called the local results or the local listings. Sometimes when you do a very local search for, let's say, a pest control in the city that you're looking for, you may find a map section with a whole bunch of listings underneath it. And it's usually placed above the organic listings and below the paid section. So very, very high in the search results page, but that's the local results page. That is also considered organic. There is a separate product called Google My Business, which controls the listings on that. The Google Ads platform does allow you to sponsor some ads within that area as well. But this is basically the three-way split when it comes to the typical search engine results page: the sponsored ads, the organic section, and the local results. Now, when it comes to Google advertising, as an advertiser, we have options to opt into several different networks. The first and foremost is called the search network. And that's the default. If you ever wanted to advertise on google.ca, the .com, the search engine itself, that's considered the search network. Now, the search network does have an extension as well. There are other search engines that are opted into the search network where their listings are powered by Google. So, for example, AOL. AOL is part of Google Search Network. You have the ability to turn that off and only advertise on google.ca and google.com only, or you can opt into the expanded network as well, which includes the other search engines. So that's the first and foremost default network when it comes to the advertiser option when it comes to Google Ads. The next one is their display network. Their display network is probably the largest display network across the entire planet. It covers about 80% of the web. And there's a wide variety of options, from display ads to text ads to video ads, and their displays split into even contextual-based targeting as well, which we'll kind of get into that in a few slides a little bit further. Also, as an advertiser, they have a newer ad format called shopping ads. It's been out for a few years as well. Google does have its own shopping network called Google Shopping, where people can go in and search for products and compare prices and find the best value or the cheapest price around in order to cross compare. And now what you can actually do with Google Ads is you can opt those into your Google Ads platform and display those on the search results page. So if you're in an e-commerce business or have a catalog, anything related to products, that is another new ad format that we can opt into. YouTube is the second largest search engine on the planet. It's also owned by Google as well. And through the Google Ads platform, we can also opt into YouTube ads. And we'll kind of get into a little bit about the options that are available. So these are just the 4 ad networks that every advertiser has access to: the search, the display, shopping, and YouTube. And as an advertiser, we can select any one of these or all of these or any combination of these. So that's one of the biggest advantages to Google, is that they have very large reach when it comes to their advertising platform. The ad types. As an advertiser, there are quite a few different types of ad units that are available to advertise with the search engine. So for your clients that may be wondering how the ads work, typically most clients are introduced to, whenever they do a search, just the typical text ads. And that's what you're seeing on my screen in the top left-hand corner right now, which is the text ads. It has a title, it has the URL, and it also has 2 lines of text. That's the typical text ad that you're seeing on the search engine. Now, there is expanded versions of this, which has what's called ad extensions, and you may see additional phone numbers or location addresses or additional links underneath it. Those are called ad extensions, and that is an extension to the text ad itself. Underneath the text ads, we also have the ability to introduce image ads. So just like display ads, Google does have that display network where they can showcase image ads across the web as well. And they have a wide variety of formats. The one that you're seeing on my screen is just one of the ad formats that are available, but they have big box, all the standard IAB standard ad units are available when it comes to advertising on Google. Right next to it, you're seeing a responsive ad. Now, the responsive ad looks very similar to a text ad. However, it's slightly different. It's a newer product that was introduced a couple of years ago by Google for advertisers who wanted to opt into the display network but didn't have the ability to create display ads. So what they did was they created the responsive ad system, which allows you to take your text ads and turn them into display ads. And you don't have to create 8 or 10 or 11 different ad unit sizes. What you'll actually do is select a template, create one ad, and then Google will automatically resize itself depending on the platform that's being, or the device that's being used to display that ad. So if you're on a mobile, you might see a shorter ad. If you're on a desktop, you might see a wider ad. It depends. So it is a newer ad format that's available to advertisers if they don't have the luxury of creating display ads. YouTube video ads is also known under a platform or a name called TrueView. This is, as I mentioned, YouTube is the second largest search engine on the planet right now. quite heavily used in North America. It is staggering the amount of hours that the average Canadian or American spends on YouTube itself. And there are a wide array of different advertising options. The first and foremost that you're seeing on my screen right now on the right-hand side is the pre-roll ads, the ones that usually display before a video and you're allowed to skip it after 5 seconds. So that's the most foremost one. There are bumper ads and there are different types of video ads itself, but that is another ad unit that's available to the average advertiser if they wanted to select and advertise on the Google Ads platform. Here's a sample of the shopping ads. So on my left-hand side, you're seeing a quick little sample. Usually if you're searching for product base, you'll normally see it at the very top of the page or on the on the top right-hand side of the page itself. And what it's basically meant to showcase is different products that are available, the price points. This is what your shopping ad looks like. And it also works on the same model as all the other types of ads, or sorry, as the text ads as well. And on the right-hand side, you're also seeing our call-only ads. So this is Google's mobile options. If you only wanted to showcase, instead of driving traffic directly to a web page or a landing page, you can actually put in the phone number, and when somebody clicks on it, it makes a direct mobile phone call. So that is one of the options for the call-only ads. Now, in terms of targeting options, there is a wide array of targeting options that are available with Google Ads. With the search network, you can bid on a cost per click basis, meaning that you only pay as an advertiser every time somebody clicks on the ad itself, not every time the ad is served, which is what's considered as an impression. And on the display network, you have both options. You can bid based on cost per click or by CPM, and CPM is the cost per 1,000 impressions. So if you're an advertiser and you wanted to get the best bang for your buck when it comes to certain types of display options, CPC might be a benefit. And if you're on a very high cost per click industry, CPM might be a little bit more benefit there as well. And there's a wide array of targeting options. With both, you can select by devices, language, and location targeting as well. But when it comes down to display, there is quite a few different options such as demographics, affinity, in-market, custom intent. You can do remarketing campaigns, which allow you to retarget audiences that have visited your website. You can also do contextual-based or content-based targeting, where you can select based on topics and placement and content keywords, etc. So a wide array of targeting options exist for the average advertiser when it comes to either selecting from the search or the display network. With Facebook ads, that's the next section. As I mentioned, if you have any questions about the Google Ads Network or the section that we just covered, feel free to enter your questions at the bottom and we'll answer that. I'm just going to be zipping through the next section a little bit more quicker because the brunt of the presentation is really about when to select which channel over the other. So Facebook ads, let's talk about Facebook ads. Owned and operated by Facebook Inc. Originally started, if anybody actually remember back then, back in 2003, it was originally started by Mark Zuckerberg as a product known as FaceMash. And that obviously ended up going through a lot of different changes. And I'm sure people have seen the Social Network movie as well. A lot of troubling history over it. And now it is one of the largest corporations on the planet. They also own Instagram, WhatsApp, Oculus, and quite a few more other properties as well. They're not as large as Google when it comes to advertising revenue, but it is staggeringly increasing. Just last year alone, Facebook ads accounted for $55 billion in US ad revenue as well. And Facebook is considered the Google of social media, meaning that anytime someone thinks about social media, Facebook ads is the largest platform out there. So that's why the term is coined as Facebook is the Google of social media. So as an advertiser, let's talk about some of the advertising options that you have. So the first thing is the ad network. So just like Google, they also have their own ad networks that you can opt into. And the two foremost ad networks that you can opt into for advertising is Facebook as well as Instagram. And those are the two main networks that majority of the advertising is done through, the Facebook ads platform. But they also do have access to a few other networks as well, which is called the Audience Network. The Audience Network is mainly expanding your ads to mobile apps in their expanded audience network. So if you wanted to showcase your ads on other third-party mobile apps, that would be your audience network. Facebook does have its own messenger service that a lot of people use, that quite heavily use. especially when they're using Facebook on a daily basis. You can now also advertise within the Facebook Messenger window as well. WhatsApp is also a platform that's been recently added to the Facebook ads platform as well. So as people are using WhatsApp, you can also advertise on that platform through the Facebook ads network. Now, even though Facebook has all those 5 different networks to choose from, about 90% of probably all the advertising is mainly done through the Facebook ads platform on Facebook, as well as Instagram as well. There are 4 different main types of ad units as an advertiser that you get access to. One and foremost is the video option. So within their feeds, you can display your video and showcase it there. The next option that you're going to see next to that is the image ad. This is the primary, the original ad format that came with Facebook, where you're allowed to add an image, text above it, below it, with a call to action. They've also introduced a little bit more for product-oriented type of businesses called carousel ads. So if you have multiple products or multiple services you wanted to showcase, instead of creating multiple ad units, what you can actually do is create one ad unit called a carousel and then showcase those as multiple options within that same ad unit. And that's what the carousel is for. So if you'll notice on my screenshot, it's only showing the middle one, but you can see that you can scroll left or right to see the other options as well. And the collection ads, that's a whole different format that's available. It's an expanded version of the carousel ads. And the image ads. It usually starts with an image or a video at the top, and then your additional options or your carousel options show below it. So it's kind of a combination of the image, video with the carousel, and that's a newer ad format. So a lot more visually available options are available on Facebook, and that's one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people gravitate towards Facebook ads, is because they do have much more attractive ad units. When it comes to targeting options, similar to Google, you can of course select by location as well, but there is a huge difference between advertising on the search engine versus Facebook ads. Facebook ads, you're not actually doing a search for any sort of terms. Therefore, what you're doing is you're advertising based on the audience. So you can select based on demographics. So you can select an audience based on age, gender, education, relationship status, job title, and quite a few more other things as well. So in order for an advertiser or a marketer to really promote a campaign on Facebook, it's a little bit more extra work because you have to identify who that typical audience is. Unlike Google AdWords, Google Ads, where you can select a keyword list and use some tools to find those keywords, with Facebook ads, the first step is really understanding who that buyer is or who that target market is, and then creating campaign based on that. So it's a little bit different when it comes to creating campaigns on Facebook. You can also target based on interests. So hobbies, anything like that. Choose based on behavior, maybe prior purchase behaviors, and also based on connections. So you can reach out to people who are connected to your Facebook page or an event that you've created on there, or you can even exclude those type of audiences from your ads. So it's really a social-based advertising platform, very different format from the search engine. So if you were to really compare apples to apples, Google and Facebook aren't really the exact same product. Google and Bing would be a little bit more closely related to being the same product. These are 2 totally separate options. But typically when you're dealing with the average business, whenever it comes to lead generation or branding, Facebook and Google typically comes in. So that's why we're comparing it today, is which one is the right one. And you can use it for quite a few different types of opportunities. But before we jump into the use cases, let's talk about the pros and cons, the real meat of things. So that way you really understand and set the expectations for yourself, your clients, for your businesses. Let's talk about the pros and cons for Google first. With Google, the pro is that you can do basic to advanced targeting options. So it can really fit any size business model. So if you're a marketer, any size business can fit within Google. There's no minimum ad spend requirements. Google doesn't care if you spend a couple $100 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's absolutely no minimums. The only difference is the more you spend, the more support you get from them, or the more dedicated support you get. They do provide phone support, and there's also forums, a lot of public data available in terms of accessing support docs and so forth. So they're very well connected when it comes to their advertising platform. They do offer a Google Professionals program as well. So for those of you that are interested in becoming a accredited Google professional, they do have a program which allows you to take the testing and showcase your badges and so forth on your website. And they probably have one of the largest reach on the web. So Google is a giant just because, not only because of the amount of revenue they bring in, it's staggering because of the amount of reach they have across the planet when it comes down to devices, search engines, all the different products that they connect to. Now, as with any type of product, when you have a list of pros, there's also some cons. So even though the platform has a lot of advanced targeting options, it can get a little bit complicated. And you need to be a little bit tech savvy to really understand and gain the benefits of all of that. So just to kind of give you an example of the platform, this is the Google Ads old platform. A little bit more simple, very nice and cleanly designed. So if you've never actually seen what the Google Ads platform looks like, this is the old version. Very simple. All the campaigns are listed underneath. Everything's sorted by tabs. It's really meant for a very simple user experience. But no idea why they've decided that they wanted to redesign the platform a little bit. And I think a majority of it's probably because they want to cater a little bit more to the enterprise clients or the guys that are spending a ton of money to give them a little bit more in-depth reporting and so forth. And because of that, they've now introduced the Google Ads new platform, which was in beta for a while, but it's now the permanent platform. And you'll notice that it's really full of graphs and charts, and all the menus are on the left-hand side and so many different options. If you're a medium or an enterprise type of business, this is a little bit more up your alley, or it could be a little bit challenging, but you'll figure it out. But to the average small business, forget it. They've really made the platform a little bit more not so user-friendly. So for the average small business, if you have clients or if you are a small business, then the need for an agency to help you with this platform now is a lot more greater today than it was 5 years ago. Just going to go back to that previous slide. Another problem, or sometimes I guess you can look at it as an advantage, but also a disadvantage, but Google does have what's called the Google Quality Score that affects your ad placement. And the quality score is a score out of 10. And every time you place an ad on the Google Search Network, you have that score out of 10, which basically limits your ad exposure or increases your ad exposure based on that score. It's all about being a relevant advertiser. So Google does look at the way you set up your campaigns and structure it, the way you have your keywords, does the ads match up with your keywords, and is a landing page that you're trying to send people to relevant as well. So they're really not only looking for relevant ads to be placed on relevant searches, they're trying to get the user to have a more relevant experience as well. So because of that, they start restricting some of your abilities or cost effectiveness of your campaign. So there's nothing we can do about it. It makes managing things a little bit more complicated. There are lots of techniques and stuff around that and to improve that. And there's a whole science behind that. But that is considered a little bit of con by myself, especially. CPCs can be also high depending on the industry. The average business might pay anywhere between $2 to $4 a click. That's the average. But then there are special industries that will be much lower or much higher. So for example, legal industry, dental, anything to do with medical, it's usually pretty high as well. Mortgages, finance. So the average mortgage broker might pay anywhere between $7 to $12 a click. A legal expert in the field might pay anywhere between $10 to $20 a click. And that's really going to change based on the amount of competition you have. Now, sometimes when you hear numbers like that, you might think it's too expensive. But when it comes down to it, most of those industries that have higher cost per clicks are generally also the industries where the average sale of the value is also much greater as well. So, if you reverse engineer it, it's still fine. It just really depends on how stingy of a client or the business really is when it comes to spending those dollars. So that's one of the disadvantages. Back in the days when we first started, average CPCs were around 50 cents. Now the average is around $2 to $3. So those advertisers that started almost 10 years ago advertising on Google are getting way less traffic for the same dollar now. And, slowly over time, it might get a little bit more expensive, but it's kind of the norm at the moment. Let's go on to the Facebook pros and cons. So definitely the biggest advantage to Facebook is their attractive ad units. They're much more visual, a lot more cleaner, and very, a lot more engaging. Once again, they also have no minimum spend requirements. You can also target by email addresses, which is a unique feature with Facebook. So if you have email addresses of your customers, you can upload it into Facebook. And if it matches that there's a profile available on Facebook that matches that email address, you can target those audiences on Facebook. They do also have basic to advanced targeting options, just like Google as well. And one of their advantages right now is because it's not as heavily competitive, generally you are going to find lower click costs on Facebook than you will on Google. And of course, once again, it depends on the industry. Some industries will be more expensive on Facebook, but the average will be generally a little bit lower. Now, some of the cons is that anytime you want to create an ad, especially an image ad on Facebook, you are restricted to about 20% text. So there are some restrictions on how you can display your images. Support-wise, I think Facebook probably forgot to hire a customer service team. I don't even know if anybody works at Facebook. We spend quite a bit of money on advertising people on Facebook as well, and their support is just dismal. So if you're really looking for a well-supported platform, that's one of the cons when it comes down to Facebook. The platform can be complicated. Once again, just like Google, they've made changes. You can probably figure it out. It's a little bit easier to figure out, but with all their options, it can get a little bit complicated. And they do have less flexibility on payment options. Google pretty much accepts almost everything, and if you're a larger advertiser, also allows you to do invoicing, whereas opposed to Facebook, it's majority credit cards or PayPal, and they have certain credit cards that they don't accept depending on your region. And one of the cons also is that you normally, for pretty much almost all ad units that you want to advertise, you're going to need a Facebook page in order to advertise. If not, then unfortunately, if you have an agency advertising for you, your agency's logo is going to be the one that's showcasing on the ad, and that's going to create confusion. So there is a requirement that businesses do need to have a Facebook page in order to advertise on it. And if you are using a third-party agency, then the agency needs to have access to that page. So there is some additional steps that are required to launch a Facebook campaign that's not available, or that's not really required when it comes to Google. So because of that, it does take a little bit longer to launch campaigns on Facebook than it normally would be on Google. So let's talk about the use cases. I'm going to try to hurry this over the next 5 to 6 minutes. But the use cases realistically are really going to be looking at, I'm going to be looking at different types of scenarios and which platform probably makes the most sense, depending on that criteria. So the very first one that I'll kind of look at right now is budget. If you have a client, or if you're evaluating it for yourself and budget is the only concern that you have, then it doesn't matter which platform you go to. Doesn't matter if you spend on Google, it doesn't matter if you spend on Facebook ads. From a budget perspective, they both have the same minimum options. Now, the only time a budget would come into play is if you're in one of those industries that you know are quite expensive to advertise in. That's where you may kind of determine, okay, well, maybe it's going to be a little bit too expensive on Google. Let's put it on Facebook. That really depends. But most of the time, if you're strictly just looking at budget only, then it really doesn't matter which platform you select. If you want to do branding campaigns are probably much better done on Facebook than it is on Google Ads. And that's a general standpoint, general branding. There's much more intricate types of branding. But from a general standpoint, if you wanted to get your name out there, branding is really about visual and auditory. And Facebook has those ad units to help you brand, whereas opposed to Google, you can't really do too much branding with a text ad. You can do some branding with the display ads and the video ads that are present on YouTube, but the Facebook ads platform, almost pretty much all their ad formats are visual. So not only are you advertising, you're also building your brand at the same time with all their advertising options. If you had a service-based business, so this is probably a good majority of the agencies that we deal with, the majority of their clients are a service-based business. And oftentimes we get the questions about which one should I go after? And the typical first thought process that comes into our mind whenever you're trying to advertise for a service-based business, and just as an example, maybe a plumber or an HVAC person, anybody offering services, dentists, lawyers, usually whenever we think of a service-based business and lead generation is a criteria, then Google Ads is the first top of mind service that we look at, or the channel that we look at. And that's simply because When you're on Google, you're actively searching for that product or service. So you're a little bit more closer into that funnel. Now, if those services or those businesses have video, then that kind of changes things a little bit, because video does really help convert for local service-based businesses as well. So if that business has a video and they wanted to generate leads, then that teeter-totter would be on the other side. Facebook would be that more advantageous channel to go after. But otherwise, bluntly looking at just service-based, the first thing that we would probably recommend is the Google Ads platform if you're a service-based business. If you're a product-based business, if you have a tangible product, maybe you're selling iPads, maybe you're selling computer equipment, maybe you're selling gizmos and gadgets. Anytime you have any sort of tangible products, Facebook usually does much better when it comes to advertising. And simply because, once again, most of the time when you have products, people like talking about it. It is a little bit more social than a service. But also at the same time, once you put a visual component to it, it does work a little bit better. So on average, if you have a product that you're trying to advertise, then it'll probably do a little bit better on Facebook ads than it will do on Google ads. If you wanted to advertise on Google ads, oftentimes these are the people that are going to be searching for the products if they already know what it is, or it's kind of complementing other service programs that you're running. If you wanted to do any sort of mobile app download campaign, so if your customer or yourself have a mobile app and you want to promote that and you want to create a lot of engagement and create a lot of downloads, then by far Facebook ads is probably going to be the way to go. Google ads does allow you to advertise mobile apps that are in the Google Play Store as well as the Apple Store as well. The unfortunate reality is that time and time again, from all the campaigns we've ever run, because of that visual component, we find that Facebook ads generally performs much better when it comes to mobile app download campaigns. I haven't yet seen a campaign where Google has outperformed Facebook yet when it comes to mobile app downloads. So some interesting food for thought. If you're doing retargeting, now both channels have retargeting options. Both Google does have that and Facebook has that. And this is where you're going to get split reactions depending on who you're asking. And once again, retargeting for us really means going after the audience where they are. And the reason why we've selected Google Ads as the best option for retargeting is simply because they have way more reach when it comes to retargeting than does Facebook. Now with Facebook, you're only retargeting those people while they're on Facebook. Not everybody has a Facebook page. Not everybody will be within that area, but people are on the web all the time using third-party sites. And as I mentioned, 80% of the web serves some sort of Google Ads. So they're probably going to be, they're going to have a much better interaction rate on retargeting on Google Ads than you will have on Facebook. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that every single campaign will work better on Google versus Facebook. This is solely based on reach. So anytime a retargeting campaign comes in, Google Ads is our first go-to. And of course, you can definitely complement that. So whenever I pick these services, we're not really saying that you just have to pick one or the other. We're saying which one's more favorable. If you have the budget, do both. But if you have a limited budget and you need to go after what you think is going to work, right away, or go after the lowest hanging fruit, then go after Google Ads. If you're doing any sort of branding based on video, even though both platforms offer video when it comes to Facebook ads video versus Google Ads video, which is on the YouTube network, the reason why we selected Google Ads for branding is simply because of YouTube. YouTube has phenomenal reach. You have way more options when it comes to the type of audiences you're able to reach. Just the amount of time people spend simply based on videos is staggering. So that's why we selected Google Ads, as if you have a video campaign which is really meant for branding, getting the message out there, whether it's a government campaign or an initiative or a new product launch, whatever it is, then we probably recommend YouTube through the Google Ads platform. Not to say that Facebook ads doesn't work. In this case, I would probably do both if you have the budget, but YouTube is going to be that primary factor for you. If you have video campaigns and your opportunity is really to generate leads, then my recommendation would be on the Facebook ads side. And that's simply because you're hitting people right in their news feeds. You don't have a lot of opportunity to skip the ads. and so forth, like you do have on YouTube, you are also able to target the audience a little bit more fine when you do display the videos to the audience. So whenever you're doing any sort of video ads for lead generation, Facebook ads is probably the way to go. The YouTube platform can generate leads as well, but we find that whenever you're running any sort of lead generation campaigns using videos, it is closer, or the sales cycle is generally a little bit shorter when it comes to the Facebook audience than it does on the YouTube audience. And that's why we have the video lead ads as being selected for Facebook ads. Client size. So this is often a question I get. I have a small business, I have an enterprise business, I have a medium-sized business. Which type of platform works best? If you're strictly looking at client size, it really doesn't matter which platform you select based on that criteria alone. And that's simply because both of those platforms are really catered to any size businesses. It's really understanding the audience and placement that's going to really affect things. So if you're trying to make a decision based on size of the client itself, then it really doesn't matter. Ease of selling. So this is the last slide that I'm going to go after. So if you are an agency and you're trying to find which product is a little bit easier to sell, you'll notice that the teeter-totter isn't really as heavily shifted over on both sides. They're both pretty easy to sell. Google Ads has been around for quite some time, so everybody knows about it. You don't have to educate anybody about Google Ads anymore. People just know about it. The unfortunate reality is you're just going to get, sometimes people have dealt with agencies where they haven't had great success, or maybe they feel it's expensive, or you have those business owners that never click on the ads and they feel Google Ads will never work for them because they don't click on it themselves, which is the worst type of thinking. Because at the end of the day, the Google Ads platform is really meant on cost per click. So if no one clicks on it, you're not going to pay for it anyways. So what are you really losing? So, I mean, at the end of the day, Facebook is that newer channel. It's that new emerging channel. It's that new sexy option because it has all those ad units. People do love the visual component of it. It is now at the infancy where people are starting to talk more about Facebook ads, whereas opposed to Google Ads is now just part of the mix. So because of that, Facebook ads is probably going to be a little bit easier to have that conversation to the average audience. You'll probably get a little bit less pushback when it comes down to the types of options, simply because most advertisers don't know what to expect or don't really know all the options that are available. Whereas opposed to Google, they're probably already in some shape or fashion, might have been already introduced to that before. So those are the kind of use cases when it comes down to selecting which channel. We talked about the platforms in general. We talked about the pros and cons. We talked about the use cases. That was really the meat of this, is to kind of determine based on different criteria what makes sense and what doesn't. At the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer. Sometimes you have to test try it. But a lot of these suggestions that we made were strictly based on experience. We've run thousands of campaigns all across North America, including the world. And a lot of these are based on the average experience we get whether you're advertising to a small business or an enterprise business. So this is 100% based on experience. But you know what? There are going to be exceptions. There are going to be exceptions to the rules. There are going to be branding campaigns generically that might work better on one channel versus the other, which might be opposite of my slide. But we're not looking at the exceptions here. We're talking about the average, the majority of the businesses that you will come across when it comes to servicing them, whether it's on the Google Ads platform or whether you're on the Facebook ads platform. Now, I know we have a few minutes left. I ran a little bit overwards, but I would love to open this next little section. If anybody has any questions, feel free to, the chat's still open. So if you have any questions, you feel free to enter it in the chat or in the open questions section on the left-hand side of that at the bottom of your screen. I'd be more than happy to answer that. If you don't have any questions, no problem at all. Most of you probably already know my email address to reach out to us if you need any sort of assistance or want to have an additional conversation afterwards. But this presentation, the system will email you out a recorded copy of this presentation if you wanted to view it again later. And if at any point in time somebody wants an actual copy of the presentation itself, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to forward this over to you as well. Now, as I can see, it seems like we have a very quiet group. No one really wants to answer any questions or ask any questions. I'm more than happy with that as well. One of the reasons why we want to keep these a little bit more shorter when it comes down to these learning experiences. It's very easy to spend 2-3 hours talking about Facebook ads and Google ads, and it can become very complex. But realistically, it only becomes complex if you make it complex. They're actually quite straightforward platforms with quite straightforward opportunities. But as your audience becomes a little bit more well versed in the lingo and they have a little bit more niche requirements, that's where things get a little bit more complicated. And that's where the help of an agency really comes into play, is that you might just not have time for it, or you might just not be able to just kind of figure this out yourself. And at the end of the day, there is a value to going towards an agency to help you manage these services, instead of killing your time and focusing on things that you shouldn't be. So hopefully everyone learned quite a bit. I wanted to thank everybody for joining this webinar. I'm still going to keep this open for the next couple of minutes should anybody have any questions. Once again, if you want a copy of this presentation, reach out to me directly, but otherwise you will get that video again. So have a wonderful weekend, everybody. And for those who watched the Raptors game, obviously we won, so I'm sure there's going to be some parades and everything going on this weekend. If you are on the American side, my apologies for bringing that up. But we're all buddies here. So everyone have a wonderful weekend, and I'll still stay on for the next couple of minutes should anybody have any questions.